All right, so we are back with Senate Government Operations. We took a little break here. We have, excuse me, a new proposal. I believe everybody is on our webpage under Rebecca Wasserman for today. And as you know, committee, sometimes I just have an urge to rewrite things. And so I've been thinking a lot about this and where we are and what could make it more clearer to people. And we had a lot of conversations about the very specific information about the fiscal, the fiscal goals. So I've been having some conversations with Chris and Tom, and this is an attempt to make some changes, and it is just a draft, but I'd like Becky to walk us through it so that we can see what it is, and I guess just go through the things that you've.
So, Madam Chair,
Yes.
The only things I'm seeing are H449 as passed by the floor in the House, and then the other piece that Becky has up there is the piece from April 23rd, which was the last.
I just printed it out.
Oh,
April 28th.
Okay.
There are two documents, Senator Clarkson, on the webpage.
I see that. And
draft as amended after second reading, and the other is chapter 17.
Right. So it's chapter, even though it says April 23rd on it.
There's actually a newly dated one that I sent.
Yeah, it's not, I don't think it's what Becky's presenting, actually.
I will post that. My apologies. I'll send it to everybody on this list. And then I will post it. My apologies. I thought I had done that.
Okay. Oh, okay. I see. I don't know how I printed it out. Maybe I got it in an email. So I'll make sure that everybody gets it in the email right now.
Yeah, Gail, I'll send you the
Gail's
latest
sending it, or Becky's sending it.
I'm sending it. Oh, wait a minute. I guess I'm looking at the 423 version. So
no, it's April 28th.
Okay, then would you resend it?
Becky, you're going to need to send it, I think.
Thank you.
I'm looking here to find it. So Becky, if you can send that to Gail so she can post it and everybody else. So we all have it.
I just sent it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will print it out.
Okay. Okay, we all have it in our email now.
Yeah.
And I don't see any of our other retirement people with us, like the NEA and the VSEA, but.
Madam Chair, the VSEA will be joining us later.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I don't think we've received it yet over in the Treasurer's office. Could you send to Ashlyn Doyon, please?
Well, it should be also posted on our website.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Thank you.
It's going to be a moment before it's posted, but I did send an email to everybody who's on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And I will send that also to Ashlyn for you.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
I can
Oh.
just wait another minute.
Okay.
I guess before everyone sees it, Madam Chair, do you want me to just, there's a lot of color coding in here because
Yeah.
of different proposals, and I'm not sure what was, what the committee, if the committee has made any decisions yet. So for the purposes of right now, should I just do the new language that's in green that you were referencing that was just decided?
Yeah,
Or that was just come up with, sorry.
I think that would make the most sense so that we can
Okay.
start with the newest, because we've already walked through the other language. We haven't made decisions about many of them, but we have had, you have given them to us. But so if you can do the, mine isn't color coded here, but I think it's green. I think I
Yeah,
know where they are.
It's interesting. On the iPad, the color doesn't come through. I opened it on the iPad, so I have to open it on a laptop for it to come, for the color.
Well, she will also tell us which section the changes are in. So
No,
that,
it's interesting which technology does what.
all right, does everybody have this now and is it posted? Okay, great. So Becky, if you want to walk us through the
For the new, so
kind of
the
new
changes.
thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah, the changes were all in section 10, which I think this is just an issue with our system here, but for some reason the page numbers are now gone from again from this document, even though I had added them back in another version. So the changes are in the pension task force section of the bill, which it looks like it's starting on page 18. If you're able to scroll through on an iPad to that.
It's section 10.
Section 10, yeah.
Just go to
And-
section 10. Then you can figure it out.
Yeah, so the changes are section 10, subsection C. So this is the powers and the duties of the task force. So I've tried to highlight in green all of the new language, although if you're not seeing the highlighting, there's some things in other colors, so it might be confusing. But the first change is in subdivision A, 1A.
Right.
So this previously referred to changing the ADAC and the actuarial accrued liabilities for each system based on the difference between fiscal year 21 and 22. That in the most recent actuarial report. So this is, and setting a pension stabilization target number based on that. So this is being a little more prescriptive with actual numbers. So putting the target numbers in there. So the language has the task force recommending options to lower the ADEC and the unfunded actuarial accrued liability based on actuarial value of assets by 25, 50, 75, and 100% of the size of the increases from fiscal year 21 to 22, as reported in the actuarial valuation review in 2020. So I've laid out here what those numbers actually were for the teachers and the employees systems, state employee systems. So it gives actual numbers for what those 25, 50, 75, and 100% values are. So you'll see for the teachers, for the ADAC, it's 16 million, 32.1 million, 48.1 million, and then 64.1. And for the unfunded accrued liabilities, it's 94.7, 189.4, 284.1 million, and then 378.8 million. And then the state employees system, the numbers are also presented here. It's for ADAC 9 million, 18.1 million, 27.1 million, and 36.1 million. And then the unfunded accrued liabilities is 56.3 million, 112.5 million, 168.8 million, and then 225 million. The next new language isn't, I also, just for context here, I also switched around the order to try to make it flow a little better, because a number of duties were added and they didn't seem to be, chronological in any way. So some of the stuff that isn't necessarily new, just in a different order in this list. But subdivision B is new, and that is recommending options to increase the funded ratios by 15% for the teacher system and 10% for the state employees system by fiscal year 27. C is not new. So this is having the task force do a 5-year review of benefit expenditure levels, as well as employee contribution levels and growth rates on a 3, 5, and 10-year projection of these levels and rates. D and E are both new. So D is identifying potential options for limiting the growth in the ADAC to no more than inflation, and then assessing the impacts associated with any modifications to the current amortization schedule. F is this was in the language before, but some language changes were made here. So F is looking at, based on the benefit and funding benchmarks, a proposed benefit structure that would look at a shared risk model for employer and employee contributions and cost of living adjustments. And what was added here is having a focus on reducing any future increases to the actuarial determined employer contributions. Oh, I see there's an extra and here that needs to be removed. Then it's looking at an estimate of the cost of current and any proposed benefit structures on a budgetary pay-as-you-go and full actuarial accrual basis. Looking at the state's pension contributions as a percentage of direct general spending, a comparison of other state pension contributions. And then this last one is new language, which is how proposed benefit changes for new members may reduce the impact of future actuarial assumption losses. Sorry, I see there's mistakes, which is what happens when I try to do things fast. But so G, there's 2 G's, G and the second G, which is really an H. Those are not new, so I can skip over those. And then what is labeled as H, which I guess should be I, is so a plan for pre-funding OPEB, looking at how federal funds can be used. That was there, but what's been added here is that it also looking at identifying long-term impacts of pay-as-you-go funding for OPEB. And then there were no other changes to the task force duties, but I can also go over any of the other language if that would be helpful.
So are there questions about these? We have both Chris and Tom, who had some input into this, here with us to answer any questions. Yes, Senator Collmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm trying to understand the difference between the 2 Romanettes that were in the House version and what appears now in a real simplified, easy to understand fashion, if that's possible.
You mean with subdivision A?
In F or in A?
I got to go back to the document now.
I think A had the two Romanettes.
Yeah,
Although
F-
I didn't really know that was a word, but
it is. We learned it from Tucker.
okay. I learned something new.
They're Roman numerals, and then there are Romanettes.
Okay, there you go. So A had the 2 Romanettes.
And actually F does too.
Well, F has, I think in the House Pass version there were 3, if I'm not, I might be mistaken on that, and now there are 4, but I can double check that.
In the last version that we had from April 23rd, they were on page 19. The two Romanettes.
Yeah, so
So-
I think it was setting the pension stabilization target number.
Yes.
I might defer to Chris to explain that because that seems more numbers focused.
Chris, would you like to?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Chris Ripp, Joint Fiscal Office. Senator Collmore, that's a great question. The overall theme, I think, is consistent with respect to focusing on options and recommendations that could focus on sort of chipping away at the year-over-year increases we saw from FY21 to FY22. I think the distinction with this language is it specifies and sort of clarifies that the task force is not charged with sort of an all or nothing approach, that they should prepare a set of options and recommendations to say to the legislature, here's what it would look like, or here's what it would take to chip away at 25% of that size of the growth, 50%, 75, or the full thing, and just translated those percentages into rounded off dollar figures to try to make it a little bit clearer with a little less actuarial jargon, what it is this language translates to into dollars.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. It's helpful.
Can we, okay, but can we, I'm going to stay there for a second. I'm just trying to read A. So it says, sorry, my dog also doesn't like the rain or something. Lower the actuarially determined employer contributions based on actuarial value of assets by 25, 50, 75%, and 100% of the size of the increases. It's a lot of language. So if I understand correctly, what it's saying is show us scenarios for either a 0 increase, a 25% increase, a 50%, or a 100% increase. I don't understand.
There's nothing for the 0 increase, but
Okay.
for the
For the 0.
yes. So the other part is correct. So for 25, 50, 75, and 100%, and then the Romanettes provide the detail on what those actual numbers are rather than just giving the percentage. For both systems, it's saying for ADEC, 25% was 16 million.
Okay,
For the particular system.
Okay. So it says, I just want to try to read one of them. Lower the determined employer contribution by 100% of the size of the increase. That means a 0 increase, doesn't it?
No.
Lower it by 100% of the increase? What does
No.
that mean?
0 increase would be status quo situation.
But what does it mean to lower it by 100% of the increase?
You're lowering the size of lowering it by 100% of the size of the increase. So the increase in the teacher retirement system was to the ADAC was $64.1 million. That would be 100% of the increase. So if you're preparing an option that would get at 25% of the size.
What about 100%? Lower it by 100%.
Then that would be $64.1 million.
That's what I'm saying, right? So
You
you're
lower
saying
it by that.
you would lower it by the
64 million.
But I think to your point is that I think by the time this would be lowered, it is going to have increased more. So you're not going to be back to where you were. Even if you lower it by 64.1 million, you're not going to be at the number from fiscal year 21, if that helps.
kind of. It seems exceptionally convoluted to me. Like, I think we want to help people understand what we're doing. And I don't know where it's at odds with just speaking plain English to do that rather than what's happening here. This is very strange.
I think the attempt was putting the numbers in, was trying to make clear exactly what amounts the task force is going to recommend lowering it by. But the intro to this is explaining the framework for it. So we're like that those numbers represent 25, 50, 75, and 100%, that they're not just arbitrary numbers being in put in the bill.
Madam,
I think, oh,
Tom,
I'm
had-
sorry.
Tom had
think-
his hand up.
Yes, I saw that. Thank you.
Oh,
Thanks,
sorry.
Madam Chair. To me, it looks like, and this is what I understood that we were trying to accomplish, is to link it to the current amortization schedule. So we already have a plan to fully fund the unfunded liability if all of our current estimates hold true to 2038. This was a way, by throwing out the numbers, is basically telling the committee, well, this is what we currently have in terms of the amortization schedule listed both for teachers and for employees. And so it was trying to get in a way to link to the current existing. So they don't come back and say, okay, the easiest way to do this is to just re-amortize, or the easiest way to do this is they'll have to look at multiple options, and they'll have to look at multiple issues going on with each year's amortization in order to come up with it. There are a lot of numbers here. There is already a plan in place. The question is that reasonable, and how else would you do it to reach these objectives? I guess that's probably the easiest way to put it.
Madam Chair, are you taking comments at this point or questions?
Both, I guess, do any committee members have any more questions or clarifications, or does it make sense? Okay, I guess.
Like there has to be a simpler way to say this. And if there's not, then I feel like I'm being asked to do something I don't understand, and I wouldn't want other people to feel like they don't understand. There has to be a simpler way to say this. I
Well,
just,
this is the attempt, I think, to say it in a simpler way. I mean, if you compare it to what was before, this is actually, I think, illustrates the money that we're talking about.
So the
what money we're talking about.
way I understand this is that the task force would be looking at options to lower the ADEC, it's called, by 25%, and the unfunded liability by
Lower
25%.
the increase, lower the delta. That's different, right? Lower the increase by 25%, not lower it by 25%.
No, it's setting up scenarios of how do you lower it by these different percentage numbers? Like how would you achieve lowering it by 16 million? How would you achieve lowering it by 32.1 million,
Right.
et cetera?
But over what? Lowering it over what? The change from the previous year?
That amount represents that change. That is the change.
Right, but that's different than saying you would lower it by the amount. It's saying you would lower it by the percentage of the increase of the previous year. Not just lower it.
Chris or Tom, can you help us out here?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think what they're saying is these are the sizes of the increases. So like you would be, the size of the increase. I'm just looking at line 5 there, just for simplicity, on the teacher system where it says 64.1 million. That would be 100% of the size of the increase.
So this is Beth, if I could try to get to a point that Rebecca made as well. So right now, this is the valuation at 6/30/2020, and the change was 604 million and 96 million. On the teacher side, it's roughly 379 million and 64.1. So 64.1 for the ADEC, 379 million for the change between the 2019 val, which impacted the 2021 budget, and the 2020 val that impacted it will impact the 2022, although you fully appropriated the money in the current budget. So that's the intent of this language. I think getting to Rebecca's point, if the committee's working to December and a new val comes out, you will have a moving target. So you need to define the period of time, because you could have a gain or a loss, and we don't know what that's going to look like. Right now, our investments are doing very, very well. We still have May and June to go. But we've this would set the timeframe of, set it from the 604 million and the 96. I think it would be helpful, and again, I'm going to have to go back up. This is the first time I've had a chance to look at it. What I think you would want to do in here is say that the current between 2021, the valuation that affects 2021, and the valuation that affects 2022, the ADEC and the unfunded liability, if you want to split them up, are 379 million for the teachers and 225 million, because that's the target on which the percentages are based. Now, I'm going to be very candid. I'm not, when you get to the comment period, I'm still answering a question. I have some concerns about those percentages, but I would define the base as, 379 and 64. And 225, and I could do the math here quickly, but I won't. For the teacher's system, it's right there at 100%. Define the difference that you're looking for, getting to Senator Rahm's question. Define the base on which you are making percentage changes. And I think that right up front, you need to say that the difference between the two was 604 and 96 million, and break it out. And then you're looking at 25% of that, 50%, 75, and 100. And again, I have a comment on that, but I think that's the answer to the question. And I guess I'll defer to Senator Rahm if you think that works.
I need some time with this, and I haven't felt more comfortable that I understand why we need to do this, like why we need to, what the discomfort was with. I understand we need to be somewhere between more sustainable and specific. This feels exceptionally specific and just, really hard to ask a group to do in a short period of time. This is like reapportionment, but like a lot more. I mean, they have to toggle to a lot of really specific ranges, it looks like. And that, maybe we could say a scenario over here and a scenario over there, and that gives us some sense of what's in between. But to say 25, 50, 75, 100, I think then they need, 2 years to do this and a lot more than $200,000 of financial support to do this. This is a huge task.
Senator, if I could, I would agree with you on the percentages. And again, Madam Chair, if you want me to comment, I think it would be helpful because,
Sure.
Yeah, sure. So, in a previous testimony, both Chris and myself said you need to have a goal. And what we were talking about was the 604 and the 96, and you can disaggregate it. You need to have a goal because if you don't, then the committee's kind of in a position where they don't know where to settle. And if you do 25%, then you have to say, what's the amortization schedule look like? And how far do you have to push it out? And then you have to do another one for the 50% and the 75%. I think that would be more helpful is if you said something to the effect of approaching the 604 million, again, disaggregate it, and the 96 million. And we came to 474 and we came to 80 some odd $1 million, 85 million is coming to mind. I don't have the sheet in front of me of the ADEC. We couldn't get any further than that. Now, you folks came out with a higher number based on a scenario that was very different. I think yours was north of 500, Chris. But I guess the issue is, I would say approaching that number, and then the committee can say, well, we couldn't get there, or this is a reasonable level of benefits. And then, but to do an artificial 25, 50, 75, and 100, I think creates it's more cumbersome, and it creates more effort at each one of those scenarios. And I would argue that if you just do 25, your amortization table is going to go out. And it's going to cost the taxpayer more money. And I think we need to say, approach that. And without putting words in Chris's mouth, we talked about having goals and trying to, and the goal that, the Board of Trustees had was to lower the number to the previous levels. And again, I think that if you said approaching within reasonable levels of benefit changes or something along that line. Give yourself a hedge, but make every effort to try to get to the best term possible within benefits, within revenues, and within to get to that. But again, I think that this is very, very cumbersome, creates more work. And I don't think, to be very candid, 25% would get you there. Now, if you need to have some combination of revenue and benefits, this still leaves you the opening. And again, saying approaching within reasonable benefit changes or something, or with a combination of benefits and revenues, or just leave approaching. This artificial construct will create more work, and the utility of the pieces at the lower end of the spectrum won't get you to where you need to be.
Okay, I understood that one of the reasons we put these in here is because it allowed for kind of steps. If we come up with a solution for the 25% in year 1 or 2, and then 50%, and so that you weren't saying right off the bat that you have to do this all right now. It's all or nothing. That was my understanding, that was one of the reasons for looking at something like this, so that you might have a different approach. You might have phased in approaches for the different, but if that doesn't make any sense, that's.
I mean, Madam Chair, have short-term goals and work your way towards the long-term solution.
Again, Madam Chair, there's an inconsistency in here. If you were to just do 25% of the unfunded liability, the fiscal year 23 ADEC will go up significantly more than the 96.6 million we're having, because by statute, you have to solve the problem by 2038. So if you do less change now, it's going to cost you more in the future, and it's also going to cost interest. The other option is to push out the amortization period, and doing that will cost the taxpayer even more interest. It's not a good solution. It would be badly received by the investment community. But if you have a 25% unfunded liability reduction, you still have more liability over time that you have to solve in terms of repayment of the mortgage. So if you lower the amount of money you're paying at the front end, and you haven't changed the mortgage, you have to pay more at the other end. And that becomes more expensive, as I said, for the taxpayer.
Okay, well, I guess that was an exercise in futility.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes.
I think just maybe to put a fine point on what the treasurer just said, and I think her point's an important one, is, I think the language she's proposing, that perhaps you move away from the 25, 50, 75 scenario would in fact more closely resemble the prior language, only without the dollar signs. So that would really, if the committee, I think the committee has latitude in slicing and dicing this how they feel is appropriate. But I just wanted to clarify for anybody that's watching that would be moving a little bit more to the prior version. It's just that the prior version didn't translate those percentages into dollars. So if that's where the committee wants to go, the dollars would basically just be what's in here at the high end. And those would be transposed over to the prior text.
Yeah, Keisha.
So that's not what I heard from the treasurer. I could be wrong. I heard her saying that even if you just did 25%, you would get a reasonable cost benefit analysis. And I think, I don't think she said just take out the dollar figures, which are illustrative of the percentage amounts. Right. I think doing 25, 50, 75, 100, those are all 4 very different exercises that are each time consuming and involve a lot of different scenarios. And so picking one and noting the costs and benefits, because I think sustainable is a very subjective term, right? To say sustainable, you could be sustainable from an employment and recruitment perspective or sustainable from a financial perspective. But to say what are the costs and benefits of taking one of those percentages and demonstrating what the amount, decrease over the delta would look like, and what the costs and benefits of the ideas to get there are. That's what I heard, but Madam Treasurer and others, correct me if I'm wrong.
So I think that we're pretty much on the same page, Senator. I think the one correction I would make, or difference, is that if you do only 25% of the unfunded liability, you're still facing those higher costs, not as high as the current amortization, the 604 and the 96 million, which, by the way, again, our calculations are by 2037, that would be $500 million of ADEC. And, at the risk of, it would increase the amount of impact it would have on your operating funds, because the growth in terms of the budget, not so much the present value of the dollars, but in terms of its share. So going with a lower number increases the amount of ADEC you'd have to have. Simply because you have to pay the mortgage. Your point is well taken about doing these at different levels, because it's extraordinarily complex. You would have to do this on what the impact is. Is it 25% of the ADEC, or is it 25% of the unfunded liability? So you'd have to do two. Then you'd be doing 8 different versions of this to get to that. And then you have the question of, do you do it to 2038? Or do you do it further out to kind of smooth out the amortization? So now you've got potentially as many as 16 different scenarios, with this. I think that having language, and this is something that I think, and again, Chris, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I think we both said that something saying that you approach it, or something with a goal, is very important to get to, and again, the definition of sustainable will differ from person to person, but approaching the reduction of the 604 and the 96, and I think approaching helps because it leaves you some room, and a combination of benefit and revenues, so that you recognize the impact that revenues might have in terms of this. Now, I believe that you need to make structural changes as well, and that you can't just rely on revenue. But I think that kind of language gets you someplace, because again, I'm looking at this and saying that you can't do 25% of the unfunded liability and then reduce the ADEC by 25%. It just won't work. Chris, I don't know if you feel differently about that.
I see Becky has her hand up.
I'm sorry, but I was scheduled for today, and I could stay a couple minutes more, but I didn't know if you wanted me to go over the other new language quickly before.
Yeah, why don't you do that? And then we can continue this conversation.
If Chris and Tom, are you able to stay a bit? Okay,
Yep,
right.
I'm good.
So the other new language is in the next section. It's section 11. And it's creating, so this is on, looks like page 23. It's creating a joint legislative pension oversight committee. So moving on to the next page, and this is in statute. So this committee is created for the purposes of exercising oversight over the state employees and teachers system, and working with and providing assistance to other legislative committees that work on state retirement systems. And I put in OPEB as an open question there. The membership of the committee would be appointed each biennium, and it would be 3 members of the House appointed by the Speaker, and they would not be from the same party, and then 3 members of the Senate, not from the same party, could be appointed by the Committee on Committees. So the duties of the committee would be to evaluate and make recommendations on issues of public policy relating to the provision of retirement benefits to the state's public sector workforce. They'd look at any changes to statutory provisions regarding the provision, design, and administration of both retirement benefits and retirement systems. And then finally looking at the appropriate annual appropriation to fund the state's retirement obligations. And that would be in accordance with actuarial recommendations, statutory amortization schedules, and funding policies. The committee would be electing a chair, a vice chair, and a clerk from among its members and be able to adopt their own rules of procedure. And each biennium, the chair would rotate between House and Senate members. In terms of meetings, they could meet at the call of the chair during session. And then I've left blank how many times during the off session that the committee would be able to meet. But there's also ability to meet with the approval of the speaker and the president and the pro tem. A quorum of the committee would be 4 members. The committee would have assistance from Leg Council, Legislative Operations, and JFO. And then the members would also be eligible for compensation and reimbursement when the General Assembly is not in session.
So are there any questions for Becky about this section? Any kind of
I'm just
technical?
having a hard time finding it. My apologies. Is that in yellow?
It's
Green.
in green and it's past the task force.
It's the very last
Way
thing.
near- It's way near the end.
It's on page 24.
Okay.
Yeah, we
thank
don't
you.
have pages on this,
My
unfortunately.
apologies for interrupting.
I'm hoping to get all colors of the rainbow by the time we're done.
Okay, thank you.
We wouldn't be able to read it because
Mine are all gray anyway. It doesn't make any difference. I just have to go to the end of the bill. So are there any technical questions for Becky about this before she has to, yeah, Senator Collmore?
I don't think it's a technical question for Becky. I just wondered how this interplays with VPIC. You've got a pension board sitting on top of them. I'm not sure how this works.
So VPIC is more is making the investment decisions for the retirement systems. This committee is more of a legislative oversight committee. So they're looking at when the legislature is presented with policy decisions surrounding the retirement systems, they would consider those. They would consider any statutory changes. They would look at, making recommendations for how much should be appropriated to fund the retirement systems. So they don't have the sort of investment responsibilities or oversight of the investment of VPIC. It's more just the oversight over the legislative role with respect to the retirement systems.
Thank you.
And I think that we saw this as being just having a retirement committee that kind of kept an eye on things as it went along from year to year. And as with all oversight committees, they don't really have any power. They have to make recommendations to the standing committees.
And I think it would be similar to the joint legislative, the Justice Oversight Committee. I never know the exact title, but they have a similar function with respect to judicial matters under the jurisdiction of the legislature.
and this really goes to, I think, the treasurer's point earlier, which is we really need to own this more fully. The legislature has to make the calls on this. We need to goes to sort of ownership and oversight, and really if we have a group charged with it, I think they will attend to it more fully.
Senator Rahm?
I can, this is not to Becky, so I can wait if it's just questions for Becky right now.
It looks like there aren't any right now.
Okay. I worry about the message that this sends, because to me, it sends a message that we're going to keep messing with people's pensions. And I'd much rather see us put language in to the task force or somewhere in this whole bill that says, after this, once someone signs a contract with the state at a certain pension level, it does not change. And what I worry about is having this oversight group that's constantly looks like it might be setting policy and messing with things, just adds more anxiety to the lives of the employees whose pensions are being overseen. And we just talked about having financial experts make these decisions. So I don't know what value a group of legislators would be adding to that. So that's just my feeling about this.
Well, I think that one of the things that we talked about was that the legislature just kind of kept shoving things down the road for a long time. I mean, we didn't take that responsibility and that
Right.
ownership. And that this isn't looking at the benefits. This is looking at the kind of, where are we? Are we falling behind? Are we keeping up with it where we're supposed to be? This oversight committee can't change any benefits.
Okay, it says changes to statutory provisions regarding the provision, design, and administration of retirement benefits and retirement systems.
But not the benefits themselves, the administration of the benefits. I mean, we can change that language, but I think that we personally, I think we really need some kind of an oversight committee that from the legislature that can be responsible for making sure that we're moving in the right direction.
This is one of our biggest obligations as a legislature, one of our biggest responsibilities, and we have no legislative oversight. We have legislative oversight, joint oversight committees on a lot of other things that have less financial impact on the state than this.
I don't know why we said someone couldn't be a legislator and serve on VPIC, but now we have 6 legislators over here that we're adding to a new layer of oversight. I don't really understand the point.
Well, VPIC is an investment committee.
This is not an investment committee. This is making recommendations to the standing committees in the legislature. Work, probably
About, I guess you've said what it's not about, but I don't know what it would be about then, because this says all about the design of the benefit administration.
If it's helpful, I mean, there are, this is the benefit issue is what the legislature is dealing with right now. But there are pension related bills that come up every session. So, there are a number of other statutory changes that do happen each year. So that could be an example of something else that they would consider. I know that the treasurer can probably speak to this more, but there's been sort of studies that the treasurer has been tasked to do over the last number of years with respect to certain membership groups. There have been a lot of miscellaneous sort of amendments to the retirement system statutory language. So I think this is more just looking at so the reference to statutory provisions would also include, I think, some of those examples of other kinds of changes that the legislature considers each year.
So I feel like that's what this committee's for, but I'm new. And then in addition to that, I think the only thing that would give me any comfort enough to support that is that at some point in the bill, we're saying, once we make changes next time, we are looking at ways to make that binding and to not continue to change people's pensions after they sign a contract with the state.
I would love to be able to say that, but I don't think I could ever commit to that. Changes are made all the time to everything. And I thought I signed a contract for my Social Security, and they're changing my benefits all the time for Medicare. And my Social Security check keeps going down because they keep giving me a 2% increase and then increasing my Medicare payments by 6%. So I think that if we put that in here, that nothing would ever change, then what we're doing is saying that any increased liabilities always fall on the legislature, on the state budget.
Just to be fair, you may feel that way about your Social Security, but the federal government, when they take on new employees, sign a contract that does not change their retirement benefits.
It never changes.
I can't believe that they're changing that those benefits don't change.
We can double check, but a lot of constituents emailed and said, I wish you were like the federal government. When my spouse signed a contract with the federal government, that is a binding contract. They do not change. You cannot change their benefits after. You cannot change the retirement benefits after that.
Is that, does anybody know if that's true? I'm surprised, but I guess if it's,
We
I don't
can
know.
find out.
I mean, without any detail, and sorry, I do have to go in a minute. but
Yeah.
Without any detail or context for that question, I think that this goes back to a question of whether there, I think it's a constitutional question of whether there is a violation of of the contracts clause, and so under the U.S. Constitution, and so I think that there's a little more to the analysis than just. It's never possible to change, but again, I can't speak to anyone's specific situations or contracts, but I think there are scenarios where benefits do change based on what is being changed and the specific contract in place.
Madam Chair, before Rebecca leaves, may I ask a question about that?
sure.
My understanding, and again, recognizing that I'm a person in the finance world and not legal, but what I'm seeing is that while there's a contract clause in the federal government, there's also a understanding, and I hate the word that they use, but that in no way does that change the state's policing, which means oversight of benefits, whether it's other state services, and essentially that it doesn't take away the power of the states under certain circumstances. And I believe I've seen different opinions on this particular issue, but that essentially you can't abrogate the state's ability to make its own decisions around this within certain parameters in terms of whether there's a financial need to do it, an equity issue and the like. So I'm going to defer to Becky. I've seen some decisions on that, and I don't have a law degree. I'm not going to pretend that I know that, but I'm looking for some help in understanding that.
Yeah, so I think this is something that's hard to generalize because it's really specific to what the source of the legal contract is and what is actually being changed. But in general, I guess what the treasurer was just speaking to is that sort of one prong of the test for under the contracts clause is whether there is, sort of a reasonable and necessary reason for this change. And that is, some examples of that are like if the state is under such severe fiscal distress, and there have been examples where the courts have found that, the fiscal situation is so bad in a state that it has warranted, and even if you are impairing someone's contract, it has warranted being able to do that. But again, it's really hard to generalize because I think it's very fact specific analysis.
So I would like to, I think there are two questions here. One is the question first about the Oversight Committee. And I hear, Senator Rahm, that you do not think we need an Oversight Committee, that just the goal was that somebody in the legislature is always kind of being cognizant of what is happening with our retirement systems. And we could say that's this committee, but this committee has a bazillion things that we're responsible for. And we can't be the Oversight Committee for elections and Judiciary Committee is not the Oversight Committee for the judicial oversight. It's a separate committee that is made up of both House and Senate members. And so I hear you saying we don't need this. I would like to hear from Senator Polina and Senator Collimore about this Oversight Committee. Senator Collimore?
I would support it. I think if we had it 10 years ago, we'd be in a different situation today.
I think that we need someone who keeps a closer eye on what's going on with the pension situation. I mean, how we ever fell this far behind without legislators being fully informed. I don't know whether that's a fair way to put it, but not reacting enough anyway. So I think that there needs to be some oversight that's clearly from the legislature. I mean, we're stuck holding the bag, so to speak, in terms of making the appropriations.
Senator Clarkson?
Yeah, I think it really goes to Beth's comment, which I had appreciated, which is, you know, we need to own this issue more fully and give it more weight than we do. And having a legislative oversight committee does exactly that. I mean, it puts it puts a constant eye on one of our greatest responsibilities, and we should pay more attention to it.
So I see Steve has his hand up, and then Tom.
I'll put my hand up too.
Okay,
And, oh yeah, Tom has his too.
yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just having reviewed this just now, I have some concerns about it. And I hear what members of the committee are saying about the legislature's role and responsibility. My concern is that the full legislature has that responsibility. And what I'm worried about, because this is a politically volatile issue, as you can see, and it's something that people care deeply about, is that the legislature will frequently, with oversight committees, defer those decisions to a much smaller group of legislators who serve on the oversight committee in the off session. And it makes it harder for Vermonters to effectively advocate and essentially influence their legislature if it's a small group of legislators who are currently, they may not have the power to make changes, but as things progress, we know that in past legislative initiatives, the legislature has given oversight committees the power to make decisions. So I do agree that the legislature does have to provide oversight. And, you know, certainly if anyone's had an opportunity, Treasurer Pierce is not only a fiscal wizard, but she is an artist. And she has also created a collage of reports that she provided to the legislature, several committees of what was happening with the pensions. And so I just am concerned that actually the oversight committee may have the opposite effect of having the full legislature provide its oversight role. And instead, it might be too tempting to just empower a small number of legislators who could make big decisions without the ability of Vermonters to be able to effectively advocate one way or the other.
So before we jump to Tom, I'm going to ask you a question, Steve. In my experience, no oversight committee has been able to make decisions. They can make recommendations to standing committees.
Right.
But I've never seen an oversight committee that can actually make a decision.
Right.
Well, so I can give you an example if you'd
Okay.
like. So the Joint Justice Oversight Committee
Yep.
and the Joint Child Protection Committee made a decision to privatize Woodside. And it was not a decision that was made by the full legislature. It was made by a small group of legislators. So unless those legislators are your legislator, it was very difficult for our members, for instance, to have any influence on that decision because their legislators weren't on the oversight committee. So that does happen. It just happened in this last summer. And so I just raise it as a concern because I do agree with you. I think the discussion about the legislature having oversight, we would want, our view would be that more legislators, the entire legislature is elected to have oversight. But we think it might be too tempting to give a small group of people the power to make difficult political decisions. And I think that is just a caution that we would have about having this kind of an oversight committee.
Well, I do have a little bit of a disagreement about how Woodside, how
Yeah.
that happened. It wasn't as clear as that, but in my opinion, because I sit on judiciary and we wrestled with that a lot. So I don't think it really was that a decision that was made that easily. And we could set up a joint oversight committee of 180 people. I don't think that's very effective.
And I don't think that 180 people will pay equal attention to it. I think when you're nominated by your peers to serve on a specific committee, that that your antenna are up for that. Your antenna is on every bill that recommends different retirement changes to the tax code. Your antenna are up for anything that would change or affect the retirement system in any capacity. And there are bunches of different ways it could do that. So I think I disagree with you, Steve. I think actually it would help with ownership. And I wish we'd had this 15 years ago. I mean, I wish we'd had a group of people who really were dedicated to paying more attention. And you're right, Beth gives us a report every year, and it's one of many reports. And if you had 6 people paying really much closer attention to it and understanding the implications of some of those recommendations, I would think we would be at a different place.
So, because really,
I just want to be clear that I did not see this oversight committee making big decisions either.
No, just
I
recommend.
just saw them as somebody as sort of tracking what's going on and reporting back.
But that's what I mean. Did I say something different than that? I didn't mean
No,
to.
no. Well, Steve had talked about not wanting them to make big decisions.
No, they make recommendations to the.
because they're paying attention.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Tom?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I think oversight is definitely needed. My one question and concern, this sounds almost like more of a subcommittee of this committee. I don't know if the legislature has subcommittees.
No.
In the corporate world, you would see this as a subcommittee because it really is addressing an issue for this committee's functioning, as I believe. One concern I would have is, well, who would VPIC report to? I know all of this legislation has us reporting to GovOps with all our reports anticipated for the VPIC changes. So I would just recommend some consideration given to the changes that you're anticipating with VPIC. There are a lot of reports and recommendations and oversight built into that. Would this be in addition to and another step before the legislature, or would it be in addition to or complementary to? And who would have the final word? What if GovOps says something different and this committee has some other different opinion? It just makes it a little confusing.
This committee has no authority to do anything. Okay. The only thing they have authority to do is to make recommendations. And really, my guess is that the oversight committee will probably most likely be made up of people from GovOps and appropriations, because those are the two committees. Justice oversight is made up of people from judiciary and probably corrections and institutions in the House. So it's the committees that are the most involved in it, but it means that is their main focus instead of the 27 bills that we've been dealing with this year and the reports that came from all of them. This committee would be focusing on just retirement and pension.
It's a big issue, and I think it needs the attention.
Jeff,
Becky, I think Becky, you're muted.
Sorry. Typically, if there's something that needs to go to an oversight committee, it's just drafted in that particular legislation to send it to that oversight committee. It's not sort of set in statute that everything goes to them. It's just if there's a particular issue that the legislature wants that committee to consider.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. Beth?
So I apologize that I can't raise a hand because I can't figure out how to do that on my.
I can't either. So just holler.
Then I'm in good company. So first, I would like to say thank you, Steve, for referring to my work as an artist. I did present in one of the packages to you a copy of some of the reports because I ran out of room that we submitted with the status of the plans some of the concerns that we had. But again, art is never a way that people describe me, although I appreciate art. But let me start with what the division of responsibilities are currently. So you really have four. One is the Retirement Board of Trustees, and they are charged frankly, they're not charged by ERISA, which is private plans, but they are charged by the IRS. And some of the requirements are that they act solely in the interest of the participants and their beneficiaries, and they act for the exclusive purpose of providing those benefits to workers and making sure that the expenses are reasonable for the plan, and carrying out duties with care, due diligence, and the remaining pieces relate to diversifying assets and the like. So they have a very definite fiduciary responsibility, and they take a look. We take a look on a regular basis. Part of the miscellaneous tax bill, I would point out, Becky, but to make sure that we're in compliance with the IRS. And we go through a process of reviewing that. The IRS used to do determination letters. So if you did a determination letter on your statute, you were in good shape. And anything that was done after that would be something that would be okay, something they would look at. But anything that was in that determination, they've stopped doing that. But essentially, you're responsible for that. So that's a board function. The other function is that the retirement staff, and they work for the boards through the treasurer's office, so they report to our office. But essentially what they're doing is administering the benefits, and there's been legal rulings by the Attorney General's office that a board that meets monthly or infrequently is not in a position to do that administration, whether you put it under a board or whatever. But we are essentially tasked with making sure that the benefits are done. Those 500 retirements that we did in the month of June last year remotely, I want to again thank the retirement staff, talking to people about their benefits, talking to people about their options in retirement. As you might imagine, that's a life-changing event, and we spend a lot of time on that, talking about their health care. So that's number two. The third one is the investments, which you've addressed in the earlier section on the structure of VPIC. And I'm very pleased that most of that is similar to what Tom Galanka and I submitted, and on top of that had the endorsement, at least in concept, by the VPIC. So the fourth is you in the legislature, and you have two responsibilities under statute. Number one, to define what those benefits are. So you are the creator and again, the owner of that. So if there's a change in benefits, we can't make it. In fact, the miscellaneous retirement bill frequently has adjustments to make sure that we're in compliance. But secondly, benefit changes or changes in contributions. For instance, in the municipal system, over the last several years, there's been multiple increases. It's kind of a risk-sharing model in itself, which is that the employer and the employee share of contributions go up incrementally. And you approve that. If not, they would go to a different statutory level and cause some concerns for the employees. So that is one of your responsibilities. The other responsibility is to appropriate the dollars. So you're around the benefits, and your issues are also around appropriating the dollars. And if you can't make the appropriation, you have two options. Number one, you can dig yourself into a bigger hole, or change the benefits. If the result is that despite the fact that you've made the ADEC, which we have, with the exception of the teacher system all the way through 2014 with healthcare, not just 2007, but the impact of not appropriating the additional monies for healthcare. You make the benefit changes to address that or to address inequities. This summer, for instance, or a long time, Madam Chair, we took a look at the Group C, who's in and who's out, another decision that you folks make. But we had an advisory committee to take a look at that. And I don't think that's going to happen this session, Madam Chair, but I think it's something we still need to address. So that's the division of labor. if you were to create an oversight committee that looked at the administration of the plan and took a look at the responsibility of the boards, for instance, to set the actuarial assumptions, to administer the benefits, I think that you would get into an issue where politics, frankly, would override the number one and the number two IRS responsibilities, acting solely in the interest of the participants and their beneficiaries, and acting for the exclusive benefit and purpose of those benefits and to members and their beneficiaries. That's referred to as the exclusive benefit rule. A while back, and we were talking, I had a conversation with some folks recently. Two states, and one state and one municipality, without mentioning their name. So one state, to balance their budget, actually raided the pension fund, and the IRS came in and said, put the money back and give you interest. And another state in a municipality, getting to Becky's question, the IRS ruled that if they didn't do something along that line, that they would in fact put the system into jeopardy, what I would refer to as the death spiral in terms of the pension system. So getting the legislature involved in doing the work of the pension boards, I think, is contrary to what the IRS has. So I would want to work on the language. I do believe, and frankly, we've been sending in reports since 2012. You're right. I remember one day we did an 8-hour piece on pensions and oversight and environmental, social, and governance, and in DC versus DB. And I think that the representatives that were there were strongly supportive of a defined benefit plan. But I would agree with you that it hasn't had the attention. We primarily make those reports. We do an annual report that all members have access to. It's on your web page. Oh, I think I have to move or the lights are going to go out. There we go. And in addition to that, we send reports to primarily GovOps and appropriations. But I would also agree with you that you have a lot of work and that perhaps you want to have folks that take a look at that and discuss that. I wouldn't say make the decisions. I would be very clear about that. But in the process, taking a good look at those issues, how the benefit structure, how the unfunded liability, how the ADEC is looking, how it's trending, and to provide that information in addition to our reports, because we will continue to do that. I think that that's something that I would recommend, but I think the language here goes too far. And it puts them in a position, and again, I've just taken a quick look at this language, where you're now creating another role for the General Assembly, and that division of labor between investments, the pension board, the Board of Trustees, the retirement division, and the legislature, I think, needs to stay, because if you start making those benefit changes, you're now putting politics. Not benefit changes, into what the pension boards are doing, whether it's changing the actuarial assumptions, changing their process in terms of how they interpret benefits and hear appeals by employees, or the disability functions. You're now getting into the issue of exclusive benefit rule. And I think that would be a danger to the plan. But looking at appropriations, looking at the ADEC, having some discussion about that and bringing it to, I think, you folks, because you are the Committee of Jurisdiction, and the Appropriations Committee, because it impacts them, is something that would work. Again, we've sent the reports, but I think that Senator Polina's comments are, and all of you, is that while we've sent the reports, it has not received the attention it should. And I think that this might be a way to do it, but limit the functions of that oversight committee. Getting to Steve's point, if there's too many decision-making authority there, you could run into 3 or 4 people making decisions, being political about it. For instance, a scenario that I would consider a nightmare would be a recommendation to go with a defined contribution versus a defined benefit plan. I think that it's all right to have the conversations with your committee about the cost, because a DC plan is more expensive and provides less benefits. So I think that's a lose-lose proposition. I'm talking too long. I will apologize for going there, but I think that the wording on this, if you're going to go forward with it, and I think there's some value to it, needs to be very clear about the responsibilities and the division of those responsibilities.
So if somebody can point out the exact language here that needs to be changed, because that is exactly what this Oversight Committee is designed to do. It is not designed to make any decisions at all. Oversight committees do not have authority to make decisions. And I do disagree with Steve around the Woodside decision and how that came about. But that aside, oversight committees cannot make decisions. They make recommendations. And so I am confused about what the language is that needs to change to make sure that we're saying that. And one of the things that I was thinking about when Senator Polina said that if we'd had this 10 years ago, we might have, we're making a shift now around having the employees of the employees will now be employees of VPIC as opposed to in the treasurer's office. We might have made that decision 7 years ago, because I know you've been working on that for a while, but that isn't something that we have the ability to pay that close attention to. But this oversight committee could, because they'll be listening and talking and hearing from people. And so I guess if there's language that needs to change to make it clear that they don't make decisions, but I'm not sure we need to put that in, because oversight committees can never make decisions. They're not allowed to.
So,
So,
Madam Chair.
If I may.
yeah, I'm going to go to Jeff.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
So thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm catching up like others here, just seeing the language for the first time. I won't rehash some of the concerns already expressed. I'll just add two, specifically the Oversight Committee, and then you've got the VPIC changing, and then you've got the task force doing some work. And I do worry about the overlap of the three now groups. And one solution may be to delay the start of the Oversight Committee until after the task force has done its work, for example, right? And so that and then you've got multiple legislators and multiple committees. I don't know if they're going to be the same. Should they be the same? Should they be different, so that you get a wider perspective? Is that advisable in and of itself? And then I think, as Beth articulated, the concern is the overlap of workload, if you will. And I appreciate that the workload of looking at the pension is a big one for this committee. And I would say that the Senate and House Government Operations Committee are the oversight. But if you want to sort of delegate that responsibility to a subgroup over the summer, and I think that's what this is, it sounds like during adjournment, because it mentions that in the language too. So I assume then, and I don't know this, would they then report in January or something to the House and Senate GovOps committees of their work over the summer, and then you would carry it forward till the next adjournment, and so on and so on.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's the way they work, and that's the way oversight committees tend to operate. And I think that during the session, they only meet if there's something really dramatic that happens. But they mainly meet over the summer, and when we're not in session, and we can't meet. So we can't have any oversight in the summer. And I think that delaying the formation of I don't think there's any problem with that. I don't think we had any thought that this committee, when we were talking about it, that this committee would have would start to operate until the task force was done with its work. So I appreciate that. I will point out that under number 2B2 on members. I do think we need to change that a little bit because it says 3 members of the Senate who shall not be from the sane party. And I think there is no such thing in the Senate. We all tend to be a little insane. So just would make sure we correct that. Sorry, I was just trying to lighten that up a little bit.
So, Madam,
Chris?
I'm sorry. I think the lighting, never mind, the reducing the tension and maybe a little sense of humor there. But you asked for some suggestions with respect to the duties. And if the committee, once the committee has finished its work, I'd like an opportunity to suggest a few things.
Okay. Well, no, this is the time to suggest them, but I'm going to call on Chris first.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just real briefly, I think the treasurer raised some really significant points and some important points. I just wanted to clarify one thing in the bill, just for anybody who may be watching at home, that the way this is currently worded, the Oversight Committee would evaluate and make recommendations on changes to statutory provisions. So it's not worded that the Oversight Committee would try to assume any fiduciary responsibilities, or, you know, I think you raised the example of benefit appeals or things of that nature, just sort of the nuts and bolts of the day-to-day. I think the way this is worded is they would focus on making recommendations around things that involve changes to statute.
Yes.
I agree with what you just said. I think it would need wording changes to align with what you just said. I'm happy to expound on that more, but the line that I read earlier feels very out of sync with what you just said. So I can reopen it. I'm sorry, I closed.
I'm looking at line 17 on page 25.
Is that the one I read before? I think what I had read before was on page 24, but I could be wrong. It said something about benefit design, et cetera, et cetera.
Statutory provisions around those. It isn't.
Can someone read it out loud? Because I don't have it.
Changes to statutory provisions regarding the provision, design, and administration of retirement benefits and the retirement system. So it's only statutory changes that are being recommended. If there are changes that don't require statute changes, then this committee doesn't address them. They're an oversight committee for the legislature. And that, I think this is standard language. I think Becky pulled this out from oversight committees, the way they're designed, but.
I definitely agree with Jeff. It should take effect. I was looking at the effective date as well earlier. It should be changed to take effect after the work of the other group. I am not surprised to be outnumbered on the idea that more legislators on more committees, you know, does anything for anybody. I'm on the Government Accountability Committee and the Judicial Administration Committee. We've met once this year and have not really accomplished anything. So, you know, I have a lot of doubts about adding more bureaucracy and more committees to our structure. I have not seen it make a difference in Vermonters' lives, but I'm completely willing to be outnumbered on this. It will not affect my vote on the overall bill.
I mean, I think we can make this effective as of July 2022. Then that means that because it would be appointed then during the report from the task force comes back before January. We act on it in next year's session. And then the oversight committee is appointed during that session and starts its meetings during the summer of 2022.
With recommendations for 2023.
Yeah, and it may not have any recommendations for 2023 because we've just made a whole bunch of changes. So it might not have any. It might come back and say, you know, what the changes that we made last year seem to be working okay, or we made this change and it really was a huge mistake and we need to go back and look at it. So it could, Senator Colomar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be very brief because it's getting late.
I know.
Beth, when I made my statement, I certainly didn't mean to imply anything that was disrespectful to your work. But in fact, I think it points to the fact that this committee would alleviate a lot of us from having to, I'm trying to say this the right way. They would meet in the summer, and we can't, especially in the Senate, when we're on two committees during the session, a lot of stuff gets by us. I will be the first to admit, I don't read a lot of reports that we're probably supposed to read, but that to me is even more of a reason why we could create this oversight committee, whose only job it is to look at the reports that you have dutifully sent to us. They can't make any recommendation, they can't make any decision. I look at it the same as if we had a situation in a prison where there was a weekly breakout, and the Justice Oversight Committee would get together and say, what's going on? What could we possibly recommend that would help this situation? Whether we need to buy a more secure system in terms of security or whatever. So I still think and I'm all for putting it off until the task force has completed its work, but I think I made a little bit of a case for putting the oversight committee because we're just so overburdened during the session that I think this would alleviate a lot of that pressure.
Madam Chair, am I on board now or?
Yep, if you have language changes, let's get to them.
Sure. So, and I would like to go back tomorrow to the scope of the task force, but right now.
We're going to do everything tomorrow.
Okay, that's great. So when I'm looking at this language.
We're here all weekend.
What?
We're here all weekend, Beth. You didn't.
Bring your pajamas.
Yeah.
I'm usually around, so
You're in charge of the cannolis and the popcorn.
I gotta go get your cannolis. I'm sorry. Okay.
I'm just.
But I guess I could eat some remotely and really not be satisfactory. So if I'm looking at this language, number 2, which has been mentioned, changes to the statutory provisions regarding the design and administration of retirement benefits and the retirement system. I would remove in the administration of retirement benefits and the retirement systems. That is the purview of the board. And while I agree that you would not make you're making recommendations, not decisions, I think the implication there is that that's in the purview of the General Assembly. So I would recommend taking that out. Regarding the provision and design of benefits is within the purview of the legislature. As I said, you are the owner and the creator of that. But I would take out that part of the administration and benefits. That I am on the Board of Trustees. Other members might, as I do, see that may be ambiguous and create some problems in the future. With respect to number 3, the appropriate annual appropriation, what I would say there is that you would receive the ADEC, the actuarially determined employer contribution, from the retirement board. Right now, we send it to the General Assembly and to the governor by November 1st for the purposes of including it in the budget and a decision whether or not to do that. So I would say there that that committee would receive the actually determined employer contribution as recommended by the respective Board of Trustees and review that. Hopefully, this wouldn't be in statute, hopefully say we could do better than that. But I would ask them to take a look at it and make any recommendations around it. So again, if it would relate to number 1 and 2, which is that if it's something that you feel is something that can't be supported, then you would have those other conversations. But I would also be careful about the piece about statutory amortization schedules. That is in your purview to change that and funding policies. But I would start off with that as the ADEC and receipt of that and the analysis of that, because again, we have conversations that's in our reports to you we do have conversations with you and the appropriations about it, but a more focused, I think, makes sense. And we certainly have those conversations with the governor's office too, which is, I remember conversations going back to, what do you mean it increased this much? Usually that's the comment. When it goes down or less than expected, everyone's happy with that. And number one, I don't know issues of public policy related to the provision of retirement benefits to the state's public sector workforce. I'm not quite understanding what public policy means in there, but that again, that's something that could be wordsmith. But I would worry about 2 and 3 and make those changes because I think then it respects the division of responsibility, and it's more clear about your actions with respect to the ADEC, because frankly, in 1990s and 2000s, if the committees of jurisdiction and the administration, the governor's office, and that involved, I just have to say, multiple governors. We're not picking on any one governor. If more attention had been paid attention to that, we would not be in such a low funding percentage on the teacher side in particular. But I do have to point out something that is inaccurate and has been said many times. The $604 million increase or the $379 million increase in the teachers system is not related to the underfunding of the past. It's related to the changes in the investment rate of return assumption. And that's not investment performance, because that's another problem where people link performance to the rate of return assumption, because across the country, rate of return assumptions are changing and going down. But secondly, when you're looking at this, the real action, besides that rate of return in the teacher system, 50-50, the demographics were also moving the curve on that, and the demographics accounted primarily teacher turnover and teacher retirements had a major impact. And if I'm looking at this from an oversight committee, I'd want to know why. And I think that's very important. We talk about other decisions in there, but the reality is the biggest mover in the teacher system was that. And I think it has some relationship, frankly, to property tax. I'm not putting an opinion out on property tax. We're neutral on that in the Treasurer's office. That's not our role in taxation. But as I said in many, many occasions, is that when you press the balloon on one end, it pops out on the other. And the committee may want to take a look at the full impact of that. So, what is the cost at the local level? What is the cost at the state level? And are you effectively making change from the sum of the parts? So that would be the changes I would suggest in 2 and 3, and perhaps adding a little bit of, its interaction and policy with relationship to tax policy, perhaps.
I think if I can comment, I think that number 1 addresses the public policy, that is what that is intended to do, to look at the whole public policy as it's affected by that. And in 2, if we take out that administration of and just say changes to statutory provisions regarding the provision design of benefits.
The design of benefits.
Okay. But on number 3, I was a little confused because you talked about they need to make the recommendation, but they need to receive it from the board first. And we can put that in there. This committee certainly is not going to be just meeting with themselves. They're not going to be operating in a vacuum and just get the 6 people get together and say, well, let's make a recommendation on the appropriate annual appropriation. They're going to be meeting with the appropriate people to get the information before they make the recommendation. So we can put it in there or not, that first they have to receive the information and then they make a recommendation.
Yeah, I think the appropriate annual appropriation is a little vague. I think that what you would want to say is that you would receive the ADEC, the actual recommendation from the Board of Trustees, and make recommendations to the full body around the issues of appropriation, amortization, and because that is in your purview, and what's the last word in that one? And funding policies. I think that that's appropriate. I would clearly disagree if you were to turn around and say, don't fund the whole ADEC as a legislative body, certainly not the Oversight Committee. I would certainly disagree if you said let's extend the amortization period to make this easier to do right now, because that's a short-term solution with a long-term loss to the taxpayer. That said, it is within your purview.
But this isn't saying what they're going to recommend at all. This is just saying that they need to take the information, they need to gather all the information, and then they need to come, and not to the whole, they're not going to make it to the whole General Assembly. They're going to make it to the committees of jurisdiction. They're going to make it to the House GovOps, Senate GovOps, and the two appropriations committees. They're not going to do it to the whole General Assembly. That isn't the way oversight committees work.
Sure.
So they're going to make those recommendations. So if we want to put in there that first they have to receive the information, we can do that. But I would be highly suspect of any oversight committee that didn't actually receive the information that they were looking at before they made a recommendation. But
They wouldn't be doing very good oversight.
no,
They would be terrible.
Yeah, I think that the actuary does the ADEC, the board.
yes,
Do it. And I guess I just would start with that instead of the word appropriation, because it almost implies, not to you folks, but sometime in the future that the appropriation could be done in the absence of the actuarial work.
no, it says in accordance with actuarial recommendations.
There you go. My apologies. Thank you.
It clearly says that.
My apologies there. Again, this is a quick read. So I think that one may be a tad of wordsmithing, and again, number two. And again, my apologies. I'm looking at this for the first time with the wrong glasses. So
As we all are, actually.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
I just want to make clear my understanding of the reading where it said of a different party was that each of the three members would have to be of a different party than the other.
No,
No. I don't
it
think-
says not all shall be from the same party. So you could have 2 Rs and 1 D, or 2 Ds and 1 R, or 1 D and 1 P and 1 R, but you couldn't have 3 Rs, 3 Ds, or 3 Ps. That's the way.
That changes things for me a little bit. I think we would benefit from having the maximum amount of political diversity in this group.
We can do that, but we don't have any Ps in the Senate.
We have people who run as both.
We do, but we don't have any Ps. The Ps do not caucus in the Senate as a caucus.
We could maybe say unless there are,
No.
we could ask the working Vermonters caucus to appoint one from each side.
No. Well, okay, I shouldn't have been so. clear
Okay.
there. I think that oversight committees, legislative committees are appointed by the speaker and the committee on committees. And if we start having caucuses that aren't even real, I mean, they are real, but they have no authority and no, they have no authority. They make recommendations and they meet and look at issues, but why would we have them making a recommendation?
Well, your first no was to people of 3 different political parties, but you could have an independent. I just think we would benefit from asking for the maximum amount of political diversity on the group. Otherwise,
I don't know how we do that.
Okay, I can.
No more than one should be from the same party.
Yeah,
That wouldn't work in the Senate.
if possible. I mean, where possible.
I don't,
We don't.
This is the way we set up this is the way almost all committees are set up, that they shouldn't be from the same political party.
Right. That's pretty standard.
I understand the argument. This is the way we've always done things. I just think this might be a year to question that. And this might be a situation where we look at what we've done in the past and it hasn't worked.
Why? Why does that makes it even more political? That's like saying two parties, that.
I don't think this should exist at all. I think it's already too political. I don't see the value of it. So I'm a no at this point.
Well, I think you want people with also people who have interest and who have expertise in this particular area, not just people that they belong to a certain party.
Those words have been used very subjectively this session.
So, Senator Rahm, I'm confused about your, is it your opposition to this particular oversight committee or oversight committees in general?
Probably a little bit of both. I mean, we have I'm on two committees that have not met at all and have not.
They're not oversight
committees. Neither of those are an oversight committee.
They're not oversight.
One's called an accountability committee. So
wait,
the point of that is.
Calm down a little bit here. That is not an oversight committee. That's a very specific committee that's set up for a very specific purpose. And it's not an oversight committee.
Okay. And the other's an administration committee, and I had to ask for us to meet.
I thought you were on joint rules.
Me? No.
I thought you were on joint legislative rules with me and Joe Benning.
I thought that was judicial.
Yeah, judicial. It's rules. It's judicial rules. It's not administration.
And that's not an oversight committee.
Okay.
They're very different.
Do you think this is going to meet significantly more than those other committees? Because I haven't seen a lot of activity from other committees that have.
Well, I can tell you why Government Accountability Committee hasn't met, because it's an off-session committee and it met in December. So it hasn't met since then because it's an off-session committee.
It's written as an off-session committee?
Yes.
Okay. So what is this written as?
It's primarily an off-session committee, but
Okay.
it does say that it can meet at the call of the chair during the session.
Yeah. I mean, they're the State House Management Committee is an oversight committee. It oversees the management of the State House, just like Legislative Council oversees the workings of Legislative Council. And they meet all, with some degree of regularity. My thought was that everybody would like to have some more oversight over and input into what's happening with our retirement system.
The whole conversation so far has been about why not have professionals and experts do it as far away from the legislature as possible. And now this is the complete departure from that.
It is. But this isn't having anything to do with VPIC or investments or anything else. That's all over there. This is saying the legislature needs to have more involvement. Beth keeps saying, or maybe it was Tom, that this is ours. We need to own it.
Beth, that's what I said in my first comment.
Right.
Beth has charged us with owning this more responsibly.
Right,
And-
this is ours, GovOps and appropriation.
No, this is the legislature needs to own this. GovOps is one committee, and we have a multitude of issues to deal with. So we have, if we want to meet all summer long as a government operations committee and just look at, it would have to be the two committees though, the House and the Senate, and just look at retirement, I suppose we could do that. That's too big for one thing. It's 16 members. And there is no way we can keep. I've been on this committee for a number of years, and every year there are retirement issues come in. We have very limited time to deal with those retirement issues, just as we have limited time to deal with other things. So having the input from somebody who has been watching this and working with it and looking at it all summer long
And understands it more fully. I mean,
would be valuable. But if it's okay if we don't have agreement on it, that's fine.
anyway, we're getting to a bit to the witching hour. Maybe we all need to take a break.
Yeah, I think we do. And what we need to do on tomorrow, and I'm hoping that we can wrap this up, because if we don't wrap this up, we don't have a bill. It's as simple as that. So we need to make all the decisions tomorrow. So tomorrow, what we're going to do is start at the beginning and go through it. And I know that people who aren't normally on this committee and watching us may not be used to the way I like to do this, but I like to start with section 1 and make any changes, and then just put a big red mark beside it that says we've all agreed or we haven't agreed, and get it over with, and then move to section 2, so that we're not going back and forth and back and forth. We're agreeing with things, and if there are things that we don't agree with, then we'll come back to them. But we're going to go through it part by part and just eliminate the things that we've already agreed with and move on. Does that make sense?
We'll see how we do.
And I would say we need to bring your pajamas, because we need to get this out. If I'm going to ask the Rules Committee to send it to us tomorrow, and we'll get it. And my guess is that there'll have to be a conference committee on it. And so if we get this out on Friday, it won't get to the floor until Tuesday. And unless we can suspend the rules to advance it to all stages, it won't actually be passed by the Senate until Thursday or Friday. And then it has to go back to the House. So we are quickly running out of time. And I hate to say that, but we are, and hopefully we'll have something that we can agree on. So I would suggest if anybody has any language changes for any of these, that you bring them in tomorrow. And that when we start going through them, we'll look at the language changes as we progress through the bill.
I guess I would just say, what I'm hearing from you feels like, as a principal, it's really hard to digest a huge new concept in 24 hours that would not even really take place until next year. So for me, that's what this feels like, is a pretty big new change that we're trying to figure out, how does it fit with all the other changes we're asking for, at the same time that we're saying it doesn't need to happen until next year. So that's just what I'm hearing, and I'm going to sit with that one.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I was caught off guard because we have heard so much from so many people that we needed more oversight over our whole system. And so this was an attempt at a solution to give us more oversight. And that's all it was.
And really keep our legislative toes to the fire and give it the priority it needs. There aren't that many oversight committees. So this really shines a light on our making this more a legislative priority.
I think there's energy, technology, and correction, judicial, justice oversight, not judicial, justice oversight.
Child, one to do with
Child protection oversight.
Child protection oversight, and a couple, but there aren't that many.
Yeah. Okay. Can we do that?
Yeah, I just also want to, I know we haven't talked about this in a couple of days, it seems, but if we're going to try to crunch things together in the next day or so, I want to make sure that people feel comfortable with the so-called balance on both of the the new commission and the task force. Something we talked a lot about early on,
Yeah, we haven't made any decisions about those yet.
right?
Mhm. Okay,
Great.
Have a nice evening.
all right, thanks.